What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Mafia and Fantasy Hotspot podcast. I am your host, Jerry, alongside my co host, Jordan. Jordan, what's going on? It's been a while since we podcasted, but we're going to get on a better schedule now going into the off season. We're going to cover a lot of stuff. How you doing today, though?
I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm excited to talk a little bit about the playoffs. This is the fun time of year. Good games. Well, I mean, fantasy season's over. So, and I guess it depends what fan of what team you are, because for some people, this is the terrible time of year. Usually for Bills fans, this is an awful time of
This
year,
is
but
golf
it's
season
not.
for us.
Yeah, your off season always starts early, but not this season.
No, not at all. I'm pretty excited about it. I am a little down that I do have to work during the game, but the good thing is I'm able to have my phone there, throw the video on, and throw my headphones in, and at least be able to listen to it. It's supposed to be a fun game. I know Bills fans haven't been this excited since 1995. It's crazy. Today, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about the playoffs. We're going to talk about some fantasy rookies that from this past year, some really good ones out there. Justin Jefferson kind of took the world by storm. James Robinson kind of came out of nowhere, so we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the head coaching vacancies. Not really get into who we think is going to go where, but just throw it out there. What teams are looking for new coaches? Jordan, if you have any predictions on what coaches are going where, if you've heard anything, we'll let you get into that, and then we're gonna. That's pretty much it. And yeah, as Jordan mentioned, fantasy season is over, but it's not completely done. Obviously, there's still some DFS. We're going to be running through the hotspot, the DraftKings DFS, and we are running a pool, which the day that this post is going to be the last day to get in there. But if you do want to get in, it's $10 a lineup. Create a lineup using one player from each team and accumulate fantasy points. So you could contact us for more info. But let's get into it. The main news is six head coaches have throughout the season have been let go of their teams. The Jets, Jags, Falcons, Texans, Lions, Chargers are all without a head coach right now. Um, Coming along with the Texans, Bill O'Brien was also their GM, so they were without a GM, but they did just hire somebody. And yeah, I mean, I guess the first question I have for you would be, which of these jobs intrigues you the most? Like, if you were a head coach, where would you want to go?
Yep. To me, and I know a lot of people are excited about the Jaguars opening. I mean, you get Trevor Lawrence and kind of a clean slate. So, I mean, that's always nice when you kind of have more of a say in personnel decisions as a head coach. But to me, it's an easy decision, and I don't know why more people aren't saying the Chargers. I think it's easily the Chargers in this situation. They were 7-9 last year. Justin Herbert, you already have a franchise quarterback that can take you to a Super Bowl. Not even take you there, he can win you a Super Bowl. He's that level of a quarterback. And one of the things about the Chargers, and I know people have talked about this, I've seen it on ESPN a million times, but they lost 7 games this season by one possession.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean they easily could have been a playoff team this season, and I think a big reason they didn't make the playoffs this year is they had over 100 games missed by their starters this season. I mean that's a significant number, and a lot of them were big names, specifically more so on the defensive side of the ball. So this is a team next season. I'm pretty confident they're going to make the playoffs, honestly, unless Justin Herbert regresses significantly, which I personally don't see happening. This is a really, really nice head coach opening. Ironically enough, is everybody is thinking Jason Garrett's going to go there, which is legitimately maybe the worst hire the Chargers could make.
It's been
They
in the
interviewed
news,
him.
yeah.
I mean, I don't. If they do that, it's gonna be funny to me. I mean, I always loved the way that the Cowboys were built, and I think they were a Jason Garrett away from winning a Super Bowl. I think he was that much of a detriment to the Cowboys over the last few seasons. And I wasn't overly impressed with his play calling with the Giants either. So I'm not sure what he did last season to really uh, warrant him getting another head coaching opportunity. But apparently the Chargers are they interviewed him. I mean, Brian Dable, your boy from Buffalo, is going to be a name a lot of people are talking about. I'd like to see him get to work with Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson if he's still with the Texans, even Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. one of the names that I've heard, and it's kind of Marvin Lewis, first of all, is interviewed for a lot of these head coach openings. I don't know why. That seems like the kind of coach that the Jets are probably going to hire. Just a guy that hasn't had a lot of success. It just seems appropriate. I guess I would just go through them one by one here. The Jaguars, Urban Meyer's been the one rumored to go there. That one's very intriguing for me. It has the, I mean, I don't think it personally would work. The Jaguars are, I mean, I think they need somebody that can build a culture from the bottom up right now, similar to what Sean McDermott's done in Buffalo, similar to what Kevin Stefanski is doing in Cleveland right now, what Sean McVay did with the Rams. They just need somebody that can go in there and completely change the culture. Urban Meyer, I think, would have a little bit of a learning curve coming from the college game, and he's been out of football for a few years now. So I don't think that's an ideal head coach candidate for the Jaguars, but I mean, it would definitely be intriguing. I think he wants a lot of control over the personnel, and I think he'd have that in Jacksonville. The Falcons are kind of all over the place from what I've seen. I know Eric Bieniemy has interviewed there, and I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, if Eric Bieniemy does not get a head coaching job, I mean, I don't even have any comments about that. It's absolutely ridiculous. The only reason I can think that he has not accepted a head coach opening is because he just wants to be Patrick Mahomes' offensive coordinator forever. I mean, that's not a bad gig either.
Yeah,
Work side along Andy Reid. Maybe Andy Reid retires in the next few years and Bieniemy takes over there. But
kind of
I
reminds you
mean,
of like Josh McDaniels in New England situation, kind of.
and ironically enough, that's the next name. He's the leading candidate for the Texans right now. It's rumored he wants to bring in Matt Patricia for the defense, and I forgot what former
Adam Gase.
Adam Gase. Yeah, Adam Gase. Yep. I was like, what crappy head coach did he want to bring in to be an offensive coordinator? It was Adam Gase. You're right. And yeah, Matt Patricia on the defensive side of the ball. So I mean, a lot of people think Josh McDaniels deserves another opportunity after his failed experiment with the Broncos. I think that's a perfect example of a guy that is just a great offensive mind, but he's not really equipped to be a leader of a team. So we'll see how he does. I mean, the Texans really need to. I mean, I think that's a really important decision for them just because I think it could dictate whether or not Deshaun Watson wants to stay, and I'm assuming that he'll have a lot of say in that decision if he does decide to stay. And you know, if Deshaun or Josh McDaniels is his guy, then they'll move forward with it. But I think that'll be interesting just to monitor what Watson does. And then finally, you have the Lions. Nobody cares about the Lions, but I've seen Robert Saleh rumored to go there a few times. I like Robert Saleh quite a bit. He's an energetic defensive coordinator for the 49ers. He's the kind of guy that I think has the ability to get players to buy into a system and build a nice culture. So I do think Saleh could be successful, but I guess, never have much optimism for anyone going to the Lions.
No, it's a tough gig. It's the good thing is it seems like all six of these teams really have something to bring to the table. You either have the Jags or the Jets that are picking up in the top three picks, top two picks actually. As much as like the pressure of going to New York and the big media there. But I mean, Adam Gase was really bringing them down. So going to the Jets and deciding either A, do you want to go with Justin Fields, or if for whatever reason Trevor Lawrence passes by, or they do a swap there with the Jags, whatever the case may be, or do you want to stick with Sam Darnold? There's always that. Jaguars obviously probably looking at Trevor Lawrence there. And then the other teams that you got, the Falcons, the Texans, and the Lions, I mean, they have top tier quarterbacks right now. Two of them rumored to, actually, all three of them are rumored to potentially be out of there. There's been some rumblings in the news about Stafford, too. He could be on the move. So, coming in and either starting from scratch with your own quarterback or getting one of these top tier quarterbacks that are already on the team. And then obviously you touched on the Chargers a lot, so I won't get too much more into that. But they're all six of these spots are really intriguing spots for a head coach, and it's going to be interesting this summer. Hopefully, all these teams find their right guy, except for the Jets, because we don't want them to do anything.
Well, that's just kind of rude.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know any Jets fans. Um,
I did think one of the names I do think that's interesting. He interviewed, I believe, with the Falcons so far, but Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, former LSU coach. I'm intrigued after one season in the NFL, and he's in his early 30s. He'd be probably one of the youngest head coaches of all time. So I think that's an interesting name to keep an eye out, and I would be kind of surprised if he got a head coaching opportunity already, but he's already being considered.
Yeah, and another name. I mean, he's coached the last half of the season for him, but Raheem Morris for the Falcons was interviewed for the Falcons for the job. So maybe we already know who their coach is. Maybe he's sticking around a little bit longer. The only other thing I wanted to touch on in the news portion was some rumblings about Deshaun Watson. He wasn't too happy that he wasn't really involved, or not really involved, but like not his input wasn't involved in the hiring of their new GM. There, of all these six teams that are looking for coaches, they really don't have a lot of ammo to play with. They got a lot of money tied up in in JJ Watt, in Deshaun Watson. They don't have their first or second round pick. So, I mean, Watson himself is an intriguing enough name for a coach to want to go there. But if he's shipped out, that's a terrible spot to go. But what do you think about the potential that Watson moves on? He signed that big deal over the summer. Nice big extension. I think it was, what was it, 4 for 140, something like
Yeah.
that. But what do you think about Watson moving on if he gets traded, and where would you like to see him go?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is a tough situation. I mean, you could see it going one of two ways. I mean, they have a franchise guy there, and Deshaun Watson is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. They just haven't surrounded him with enough talent. But if you look at it on the reverse side, I mean, the return that they would get for Deshaun Watson would be absolutely astronomical. So with them having no picks, they could really replenish all of those picks and kind of start over from square one. Let a coach come in, find his guy at quarterback, and really start over. So, I mean, I kind of understand it if you're looking to start over, but to me, that's kind of stupid because, I mean, Deshaun Watsons don't grow on trees. I mean, that's just the reality of the NFL. I mean, when everybody is searching every year to find their franchise quarterback, and you have that right now. So to let that go, he's only 26 years old. I mean, I think you kind of have to be out of your mind to do that. Now, I heard Deshaun Watson too was complaining he wasn't involved in the general manager search. I hate when players complain about that
Yeah.
because the player's job is to play. I get it with a coach. I completely get it because they work so closely together to game plan and week in and week out, day in and day out. They're working very closely. But the general manager, I mean, that has absolutely nothing to do with what Deshaun Watson's doing on the field. I mean, so I don't like when players get involved in that. I mean, the GM's job is to put players around him, and your job is to maximize the production of those players around you. Deshaun Watson as the quarterback of that team. So I hate when players get involved in that nonsense. It's really none of their business, honestly, especially when it comes to management decisions like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that he's going to move on because I do think they'll give him or they're going to move him. I think they'll give him a pretty hefty say in who the next head coach is, and I think that'll be enough to at least keep him there. I mean, the Texans have had some success. They've made the playoffs under Deshaun Watson. It's not like they've been a bottom five team every single year. And I mean, that trade just stings more and more now because the third overall pick would have been pretty nice for
Yeah.
them this season. But yeah, I mean, if he were to go somewhere, I mean, I've seen a couple different names. I said the Patriots in our group chat just to kind of make you angry, but at the same time, come on, I mean, that makes too much sense. And Deshaun Watson, if he is to move, you know he's going to want to go to a winning organization. He's not going to want to get traded to, the Jets or a place like that. So the Patriots, I think, make a lot of sense. I heard the Colts. I think the Colts would make a lot of sense. One of the best offensive lines in the league, a really young and emerging defense. Not great offensive weapons. You have Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, but I mean, Michael Pittman's there. T.Y. Hilton's a free agent. I don't think he's going to be back most likely. But so, not a ton of receivers, but they have an interesting foundation. Um, I heard the Raiders. I've heard the Bears. I think those are interesting as well. Two teams that are most likely going to be looking for QBs, and the Broncos were the last team. I think that's kind of interesting. John Elway bringing in the guy. A lot of people don't think they're sold on Drew Lock. So, I mean, honestly, I have no skin in the game in terms of hating the Patriots. So, I would like to see him go there just because I think it's a perfect fit, and I think that they'd be right back on top. And I want to see him succeed. He's been one of my favorite quarterbacks since he came into the league. He's so fun to watch. I think he's criminally underrated because, I mean, even us, when we're talking about the top QBs in the league, I feel like nobody ever brings up Deshaun Watson's name, but we
No.
really should. And we said that in the Texans mini episode that Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback, but no one talks about him like one. So I would like to see him go somewhere and win and shut people up. And so we start including his name in that conversation.
Yeah, it's not the Patriots. And I don't think he would go to, well, not that he wouldn't go to the Colts, but I don't think the Texans are trading him to a division rival, so I'd
Yeah,
probably throw
probably.
them out too. Any other pieces of news that you've come across this week that were intriguing to you? Anything that you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. We can keep it rolling.
All right, let's move on to our next section here. That's the 2020 rookie roundup. Um, it was a pretty good year for rookies. We saw, I mean, especially with no off season. Well, with a shortened off season and no preseason, kind of didn't really know what we were going to expect out of these rookies. Um, I mean, Herbert just got thrown in there because Tyrod got hurt. We knew Burrow was going
No,
to
he got
start.
stabbed
Yeah, he got
actually.
stabbed, got sabotaged. Burrow, we knew he was going to start from the beginning, so he really wasn't a surprise. And then he ended up getting hurt. Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. I mean, we saw a little bit of Jalen Hurts. We didn't see any of Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers had an MVP type season, probably will win the MVP, so it's no surprise that we didn't see him. Tua, we kind of expected to see. But I mean, I basically just named all the quarterbacks that we saw. But what's your ranking if you were to rank them 1 through 4 for how they did this year?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have Herbert at number one just because, I mean, he's setting rookie records, so naturally he has to be there. And I mean, it's crazy to me how quickly he developed and how quickly he was good. I mean, I thought he was going to be a bust coming in. I didn't think that he had that gunslinger mentality. He was very conservative at Oregon, and I was a little concerned about that. But he came in, and I mean, when you watch him, I mean, you would never think that that guy's a rookie. I mean, he was absolutely amazing this year, and he was really aggressive downfield as well, and he has a big arm to do so. So there's a lot of positive signs. So you definitely have to have him number one.
I'd agree.
Even with the shortened season, you kind of have to have Joe Burrow number two, just because I don't think you saw enough of Hurts or Tua to really say otherwise. And Joe Burrow looked really good too. I mean, he was on pace to break the rookie record for passing yards. I mean, the Bengals defense was pretty poor and he was getting a lot of attempts, but I mean, nonetheless, he was still making the most out of those opportunities. So, those two guys are going to be franchise QBs. They're going to be top 10 quarterbacks in this league for the foreseeable future. And then you kind of have the two interesting names. You have Jalen Hurts and Tua. Jalen Hurts was one of my favorite QBs coming in this season. I love that he's starting, and he probably is going to be starting in Philly in the future just because I think he's such a Philly kind of guy. So I'm excited to see what he does there in the future. I was actually more impressed with Hurts than I was Tua, so I personally would still put Hurts above Tua, even though Tua started more games. Tua, it was a little concerning to me. He looked very, and you know, I'm willing to give him another year or two because you already mentioned shortened, really no off season. They were learning the playbook virtually. They didn't get a lot of time with their teammates, so. You know, I'm not discounting any of these rookies quite yet just because of the circumstances, but I was a little concerned with Tua. He looked very erratic when he was playing, and you know, there's been a lot of talk with Ryan Fitzpatrick being their closer there in Miami, but I mean, splice it how you want. That's very concerning when you need a closer for your starting quarterback. But you know, Tua didn't play for a while as well after the hip injury. So there's a lot of factors. I still love Tua's accuracy, and I think he can be a good starting quarterback. But I'm a little nervous. He did not look good at all last season. And I was impressed with Hurts. Hurts improved his throwing motion. He was a lot more accurate down the field than what we saw in college. And I mean, with his legs, he's a threat. I mean, he really can be like Lamar Jackson with a better arm. That's really his upside, and I'm really excited to see what he can do with a full season. Another name you threw in here, who I think is really intriguing, and I have him stashed in about 1,000 leagues right now, is Jacob Eason with the Colts. Because we really have no idea what the future at quarterback holds for the Colts right now, with Philip Rivers potentially retiring. Everybody's, and I'm one of them that I think they should go after Carson Wentz, but that's not guaranteed. Jacoby Brissett's a free agent. As of right now, Jacob Eason is the only quarterback that is guaranteed to be under contract for the Colts next season. So I mean that's a fact right now. I'd be really excited to see him with that offensive line in Frank Reich's system. I think Eason could be really successful if they give him the keys to the offense. So I've stashed him in a lot of dynasty leagues, so I'm a little biased here, but I hope he gets the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I have no complaints with the order that you put him in. Um, I think that, I mean, when you have to have talks of Miami, not it's not really talk. I don't think the team's talking about it, but like you got fans in different groups and different pages saying, "Well, what are they going to do at three? Are they going to go and pick a quarterback there?"
That's stupid.
That's, I mean, that means that obviously that they're not liking what they see out of Tua. The fans, not Miami. The fans aren't liking what they see out of Tua. Herbert, I mean, he just put on a show this year. He was exciting. He was a huge fantasy pickup, especially after Tyrod went down. Just 300-yard game after 300-yard game, broke the rookie record for touchdowns in a season. And it's crazy because he was without Eckler for a good portion of it. And Hunter Henry only ended up with, I mean, he had 600 yards, but he only ended up with 4 touchdowns. And so it's like those balls just went everywhere. He was spreading the ball out. Jalen Guyton, obviously Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were there. Mike Williams was hurt a little bit too. Keenan Allen missed. I don't think he missed many games, but he was kind of banged up too. So to have the kind of season that he had with all four of your top guys catching options, missing a little bit of time, that's just, I mean, that's going to be a bright future for him there. Burrow, like to see more. Obviously, we're going to see more next year, but from what we've seen, he looked all right. Obviously, they need to go after that offensive line in the draft and in free agency, get him and Mixon some help. Um, did we see the last of AJ Green there? If we did, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd are good 1-2 punch there too. So he's going into next year with a nice trio of weapons between those two and Joe Mixon. And then Hurts and Tua just need to see more. And yeah, I did throw Jacob Eason in there. Obviously, we didn't see anything from him. Philip Rivers was there the whole time. When they did take Philip Rivers off the field for those little gadget plays, they brought in Jacoby Brissett. But Eason, I put him on there for the exact reason that you said. We don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be. He's really the only other rookie from this year that has a chance to potentially start next year. So, um, yeah, it really comes down to just those 5 rookies, and I'd probably late in draft single quarterback leagues might look Herbert and Burrow's way, might leave the other 3 in the waiver wire pool. But yeah, I'm excited to see what these rookies can do along with the rookies coming in this year. The next position we'll go to is the running back position. We saw a couple guys that didn't break out until back half of the season. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire have a pretty decent year, and then he got hurt. But he wasn't really putting up great fantasy numbers, but he was up there in yardage, and he was getting some touches. He wasn't really, when Le'Veon Bell came in, he did start losing a little bit of touches, and he did have a 3 or 4 game span where he went from like 25 touches in one game down to 6 or 7 like 4 weeks later, and it just gradually went down in that span. But he still got the ball in his hands. He still looked pretty solid. I probably wouldn't put him as the number one rookie running back of the year though, and I'm going to let you take over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're being a little soft with these rookies. This is a really good rookie class, and there's a lot of guys that are going to be impact fantasy players for a long time. I mean, usually in every rookie class, you have a few guys that kind of stand out. But when I started making this list, I was like, holy cow. I mean, there's a lot of guys that should be impact players, not only next season, but down the road. And running back, I think, is really interesting because you mentioned it. I mean, the only guy that was really good the entire season, oddly enough, was James Robinson.
Oh, the guy that wasn't
And
drafted.
yeah, I mean, just the guy that wasn't drafted. And it's kind of bizarre to me, too, because even I was like, okay, James Robinson's the kind of guy, okay, maybe he has a good season because he gets a lot of touches, and then the Jaguars go out and draft somebody. But I mean, I don't think that's the case. And if you think that, well, I mean, most likely Trevor Lawrence is going there. So, I mean, if they get Trevor Lawrence and they retool this entire team, I mean, all of a sudden, James Robinson looks pretty good long term in dynasty leagues, too. I mean, he had 1,400 yards this year in 14 games. He had a fantastic season. So, I was really impressed. He runs really hard. He does everything you need a starting running back to do. There's no reason for them to go after another running back. So, alongside Trevor Lawrence, he looks pretty good right now.
And
And
they got a
then,
nice
you,
duo trio of wide receivers too,
yeah,
so that
Chark
offense
and Chenault. Yep,
can be good. And Colin Johnson, don't forget about Colin Johnson.
I'm forgetting about Colin Johnson. No, he'll be relevant. Their defense is still going to be terrible. They'll pass the ball a lot next year. But yeah, I mean, these running backs, and you mentioned they all came on late, most of them, but Jonathan Taylor, who I tweeted about the other day, I mean, it's insane because I think in week 8, I was like, this guy's career is over. I mean, I didn't say that, that's too extreme, but he was averaging like 3.5 yards a carry, and I'm like, this guy looks like Monte Ball right now. Another Wisconsin running back who everybody was high on and never did anything. So I was like, I mean, a lot of people were like, sell Jonathan Taylor. He's not going to do anything. And I mean, he came out of absolutely nowhere and was a top 3 running back the last half of the season. So I mean, he had 1,400 total yards. 12 touchdowns on the season, and I thought it was bizarre. I didn't even realize how many rushing yards he had the second. I knew he was doing well, but he finished third in the entire league in rushing yards. Third. I mean, that's a crazy comeback. He came from, and averaging 5 yards carry on the season. So, I mean, we went from going, this guy is not anything, sell him, he's done, to, oh, he's a top 5 dynasty asset now. I mean, just from one half of the season, I was never a part of I didn't think anyone should sell low. I said, hold and see what happens. But, I mean, he had an absolute insane run at the end of the year. And I mean, his outlook's very bright. That's a great offensive line. I mean, they have Naheem Hines there, but there's really nobody else that's going to block him from being a star year in and year out. He's probably going to be a top 5 pick in fantasy drafts next year, even in redraft leagues, I think. So I think people are going to definitely pay up big for him. Besides him, you have J.K. Dobbins, who also had a very strong second half of the year. And he's not surprisingly, but very impressively averaged 6 yards a carry. He looked very good. This is an offense that obviously flows through the running game. I expect his workload to go up even more next year. He's one of those guys that I see going in the second or third round next year. That's going to be a guy with top 5 upside. So he's probably going to win a lot of people championships, I think, next season. After that, you have some guys, DeAndre Swift, who looked really good in spurts. I still don't think that the Lions were appropriately using him, which is very unsurprising. They seemed very set on giving AP his touches still. AP's not going to be there next season. Well, probably not unless something crazy happens. But I was really impressed with DeAndre Swift. I mean, he touches the ball. He is explosive. So he's going to be a big-time name moving forward. Antonio Gibson, I was really impressed with. He had his run there, and J.D. McKissick took some of the receptions out of the backfield. But Antonio Gibson looked like the most impressive rookie running back probably the first half of the season, and then he started to improve as the year went along, as did all these rookies. You also have Cam Akers. You mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think people are kind of underselling how good he looked. Because when he was getting his, and he still finished with 1,100 yards this season
Yeah.
total between rushing and receiving with 36 receptions, even considering the injury. So Edwards-Helaire actually had a really good season. I've heard several people say, he wasn't that impressive, but I don't. I mean, Le'Veon Bell's not going to be there next season. Maybe he is, but
I just think
it's
with
only a one.
Edwards-Helaire, it's more of I think people expected more. I mean, you could definitely see that with people taking him sixth, seventh, eighth overall in August drafts, but they just expected more out of him. He had a great rookie year from an NFL standpoint. A guy that I think the Chiefs are going to try to get involved more into the offense. But from a fantasy standpoint, he wasn't what people wanted. I really didn't get a lot of him because I wasn't taking him that early, and he was usually gone. If I was at the back half of the first round, he was usually gone by then. But he is. I'll definitely take him next year if I could get my hands on him. I think he's gonna. I think his stock is gonna drop a little bit. Probably won't see him in the top eight. Um, in dynasty leagues maybe, but in standard redrafts, we're not going to see him in the top eight. So if I'm at the turn, I might pair him up with another running back or top end wide receiver, and think that he's going to get more next year. But that's what I think people's argument with Hilaire was that he didn't give you the fantasy season that you thought that you were going to get out of him being in that potent offense and being drafted where he was drafted.
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit of recency bias. I just looked. It's kind of interesting. Weeks 1 through 8, he was RB10 in PPR league. So I mean he was returning pretty good value even for where you drafted him. Probably fair value. And then the last 6 games he played, he was RB30. So I mean that's kind of where I think the disappointment comes in. There is just his second half of the season. But I mean the first half of the year before Le'Veon Bell, he looked, I mean, really good. So he just didn't put together a full season, unfortunately. Let's see who else. You have Cam Akers. I'm kind of interested to see what the Rams do with Cam Akers next season. I would assume that they're going to give him the keys to the car. The keys to the backfield. He was the only running back, in my opinion, that looked like a starting running back in the league in the Rams backfield. I mean, Henderson and Malcolm Brown are good depth guys, but when Cam Akers got the bulk of the carries in the backfield, he looked pretty good. So, but when you're looking at these rookies, when you consider Edwards-Helaire, James Robinson, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, I mean, you have, 8 players there that all have the potential to go probably in the top 2 or 3 rounds. That's a lot for rookie running backs in their second year. And we started to do a mock draft, and I think all of those guys went in the top 2 rounds. Cam Akers might have went in the third, but either way, early third. So these are 8 guys, and you rarely see that from rookie running backs. Like I said, normally you'll see maybe 3 guys, 4 guys who you expect to be big, but that's a pretty significant number of guys. On the lower end, I threw in Zach Moss, and I put in A.J. Dillon. You have to, and we'll talk about dynasty buy lows at a later time. It might be too late for A.J. Dillon after the big game he had, but Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are both free agents, so A.J. Dillon potentially could take over that backfield for the Packers and have a huge season next year. And he looked really impressive when they gave him carries. So I'm excited about A.J. Dillon. We'll see. And I don't think the Packers are going to sign Aaron Jones to a big contract. I think they bring back Jamal Williams to complement A.J. Dillon, but I have a good feeling that especially considering they took A.J. Dillon in the second round as one of the first running backs off the board. They obviously like him. They have a lot of faith in him. So I'm excited about him. Zach Moss kind of split time with Devin Singletary the entire season. He was a little capped by that. He ended up scoring, 5 touchdowns on the season. So not as many as some people were hoping for. Josh Allen still steals some of those red zone touchdowns, but he's going to be the kind of guy I think that you draft as like an RB4, and he can be a flex play during bye weeks. And I think as long as Singletary's there, it's going to be capped. They're going to be a true 50-50 timeshare.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said. AJ Dillon, I mean, I can't really move him above any of these guys, but I'm definitely intrigued and interested in him for next year, especially if Aaron Jones goes away. He's still in. I mean, if we find out that Aaron Jones is not being retained and he ends up leaving, Dylan's stock is just going to jump right up,
Yeah.
and for good reason too. I personally have a hard time deciding who my number one is. I mean, we saw a lot of good out of Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
I think J.K. Dobbins is going to have a huge year next year, especially. I mean, even Mark Ingram was being he wasn't even hurt; he was being healthy scratch. So we might maybe he's not back. I don't know what his contract situation is like, or if he's at the end of the contract, or if they have an out with him where they're not losing too much money. But he's up there. Swift. I mean, everything that you said about Swift, I definitely agree with. And if you didn't say it, I was going to bring it up with Adrian Peterson just getting in there and stealing some touches away. I don't think that
Annoying.
happens again next year. So I think Swift goes up there. He hopefully he works on his catching though, because he did drop one or two
Mm,
game-winning touchdowns.
he
I do
did. That was
remember that.
painful.
Yeah, I think the one was in like week one or something, right on the goal line, dropped it. But and then I don't know why I might be the only one thinking this, but like James Robinson scares me to an extent because of the fact that they do have a new coaching staff coming in, they have a new quarterback coming in. They're just kind of who knows if this new coach is going to want his own guy, want to bring in a higher profile free agent. I mean, obviously James Robinson is on that cheap deal. He can be had for the next 3 or 4 years, however long his contract is, for really really cheap and build around the rest of the team. While Trevor Lawrence is on a rookie contract and all that, but it's that's the only thing that really scares me is new coach coming in. Do this guy's undrafted? Yeah, he had an excellent year, but he really had it because there was nobody else in that offense really to do anything. Will the new coach like James Robinson? And if we go in and they don't bring anybody else in by next year, then yeah, I have no problem taking them in the early part of the draft, second round, maybe sneaking into the first. But I got to see them kind of be committed to him first.
Mhm.
Akers, I definitely agree with. Antonio Gibson was one of my favorites this year. He did have that injury. I also had him on the bench during the Thanksgiving Day game. I think I ended up winning that week, but I that definitely hurt me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about all these guys next year, with the exception of what I said about James Robinson. I'm still excited about him. I gotta see Jacksonville just be committed to him next year.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting point though, because we mentioned that at some point we'll talk about dynasty buy lows. I mean, there's a potential sell high candidate. I mean, James Robinson was a top. I think he finished RB6 by the end of the season. So, I mean, you have a top six running back. If somebody is willing to pay me a top six running back value for James Robinson, I mean, I'm probably dumping him. I mean, I don't think that I'd count on him doing that for the next 5 6 years. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point to bring up.
All right, let's move on to the wide receivers here. There's a guy by the name of Justin Jefferson who did pretty well. Um, I I really didn't like him at all this offseason. He kind of just grew on me. I absolutely hated him. But everything that I just said is completely false because I loved him. He's I, I'm going to be targeting him everywhere. I'm going to pick him in the first round just so nobody else can.
That doesn't surprise me.
A couple other guys. I mean, Higgins looked really good when Burrow was in there. He kind of fizzled out. Ayuk, he was kind of. I mean, he dealt with some COVID stuff. Also, he had the pressure of being the wide receiver one because Debo missed some time, and he like the one week I remember having him. I forgot what week it was. It was either the week before the playoffs or it was the first game of the playoffs, which was either week 13 or 14, where his week was saved because of a short yardage touchdown on fourth down, and if it wasn't for that, he would have ended up with like 2.5 points. So he's really boom or bust. I think they need to get a guy on the other side that isn't Debo Samuel. I mean, they can still keep Debo, and I know they're going to keep Debo. He was a high draft pick too, but they need like Debo and Ayuk kind of remind me of the same kind of players. So they need somebody different, like a big Mike Williams or a Michael Pittman, somebody big on the other side that can take a little bit. They could take a little bit away, and I would love Ayuk a little bit more. And they need a
Maybe they'll
quarterback
trade
too.
for Julio and reunite him with Kyle Shanahan.
That would be nice. I mean, they just need a different style wide receiver to complement Ayuk and Debo. Claypool was amazing this year. He kind of, I don't want to say he fizzled out, but it doesn't seem like Ben was really going his way later on in the year. It was looking more towards Juju and Deontay. Eric Ebron got in there a little bit too, so it's just a lot of mouths to feed out there in Pittsburgh. But do like him for next year, and then yeah, I'll swing it over to you. And I know you were the big wide receiver guy this offseason, so what do you got to say about these guys?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who wants to say anything negative about Justin Jefferson is wrong. I mean, at this point, I mean, you can say, I liked Justin Jefferson as a player. I just didn't think he was going to have that kind of opportunity, especially as a rookie. So that was really the surprising piece to me in an offense that relies on the running game more. And Dalvin Cook still had an enormous season, even with and Adam Thielen. I mean, they had several top 10 players at their position, Cook, Thielen, and Justin Jefferson. So there's a lot of fantasy relevance on that Vikings offense, which is probably just surprising within itself. But T. Higgins, I think, would have easily been over 1,000 yards this year if Joe Burrow stayed healthy. And you mentioned it several times in our group chat throughout the year. I mean, he had 10 points for like 10 straight games at one point. He was just very consistent the entire season. Joe Burrow and him built a really nice connection, and I think T. Higgins, I wouldn't be surprised if him and Justin Jefferson are going back and forth year in and year out as who's the best wide receiver in this class. Actually, I mean, straight talent-wise, CeeDee Lamb is still my favorite. When you watch CeeDee Lamb play, he arguably still has the best hands in this class. He has a great feel for running routes. He was hampered quite a bit by Andy Dalton being the starter there. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if CeeDee Lamb. This is going to sound a little insane, but I wouldn't be surprised if CeeDee Lamb had a Justin Jefferson kind of season this year if Dak stayed healthy the entire year. I mean, CeeDee Lamb was already on the borderline of 1,000 yards with Andy Dalton throwing to him most of the season, and that to me is very impressive. So I love CeeDee Lamb. I think that he's arguably the most talented in this class. I mean, I can't really go against Justin Jefferson right now, so I'll just say arguably because it's probably Justin Jefferson at this point. But there's a lot of career to be played still. But I still love CeeDee Lamb. Michael Gallup's future is kind of unknown right now. He has one more year on that deal. You mentioned Chase Claypool. Very intrigued by him as well. Juju's going to be a free agent. We'll see if the Steelers bring him back. If not, Claypool's value is going to go through the roof. Him and Deontay as their two starters next year. Brandon Ayuk, I think. I agree. That's why I hated that pick so much. So I was like, why did you get another Debo when you already have Debo? I mean, they needed a big-bodied receiver, and that was a silly pick to me. Not that Ayuk won't be productive. I think he'll be a good slot receiver most of his career, and he'll put up some, kind of like Jarvis Landry, but that's kind of his upside. I don't know if he'll ever hit that level, but a similar kind of player. And then you have just a lot of intriguing names to me after those bigger guys at the top. You have Jalen Rager, who was kind of all over the place. One thing that kind of concerns me is Jalen Hurts wasn't really looking his way, so they didn't have a lot of chemistry built. So we'll see if that changes moving forward. And a lot of these receivers dealt with a lot of injuries. I mean, most of them only played around 10, 11, 12 games, the guys that we're going to mention now. Michael Pittman, who I really liked, I'm still intrigued by him moving forward. Looked okay this season. I don't think he was fully recovered from that injury in the offseason, but if they lose T.Y. Hilton next year, he could definitely be primed for a nice year. Henry Ruggs, I still really like in Vegas. We'll see what they do with Nelson Aguilar moving forward, but Aguilar had a huge year, so I wouldn't be surprised if they retained him. But Ruggs dealt with a lot of injuries. His rookie season, though, I mean, I said during the draft I think that he can be Tyreek Hill like. I mean, I still stand by that. Henry Ruggs only played in 13 games, but his per game average in receiving yards was actually pretty similar to Tyreek Hill as a rookie. So I still think he can develop. He still has great hands. He has that speed. He just needs more of an opportunity to season himself. Jerry Judy, who was kind of all over the place. He had some big games. Then when Drew Lock was down, their backup seemed to favor 100 Tim Patrick. But I mean, Jerry Judy overall still had 850 yards as a rookie. There's no reason why he won't be a starter for that team next year. We already mentioned Laviska Shenault in Jacksonville. I mean, I think he gets a huge boost. Denzel Mims is another guy for me. He didn't get a lot of targets, didn't get a lot of yards for the Jets, but I thought it was interesting that during his first 7 games, he ran a route on 100% of the Jets' offensive or passing plays. So they were trying to get him involved. He just wasn't getting the targets, and they weren't looking his way. Um, Two of my favorites moving forward are Darnell Mooney and Quintez Cephas. Cephas is, I think, going pretty deep. He didn't do much this season, but there's a lot of question marks in terms of what the Lions' pass catching situation is going to look like in the future. The Galladay hitting free agency, Marvin Jones hitting free agency. I mean, Cephas could start for this team next year, so I like him as a stash moving forward. Darnell Mooney actually had a pretty under the radar season overall. He had 600 yards and 60 receptions. I don't know how many people realize that, but that's a very impressive rookie season. Allen Robinson has been very unhappy there and is a free agent this offseason, so most likely Darnell Mooney is going to be a starting receiver for the Bears next season, and I was impressed. He's very speedy, but he runs pretty clean routes, better than I imagined. I thought he was just going to be a deep threat, but I think he can develop into one of the better receivers in this class that nobody's talking about. And other names, and a lot of it is going to depend on the future contracts of the receivers around them. KJ Hamler running the slot for the Broncos, but they do have several guys to compete with targets there. So I'm not as high on Hamler as other people are. I threw in my boy Van Jefferson from the Rams. Their third wide receiver, Josh Reynolds, is a free agent. So if Van Jefferson's able to step in and take that role, you might see him have a little bit of relevance. Your boy Colin Johnson, I'm not going to say anything else. He had his moment in the sun. But no, I actually like Colin Johnson too. I think that in that offense, potentially he has some sleeper appeal next year. And you threw Tyler Johnson in here as well, who's another one of your boys. But there's a quite a few options in that Tampa Bay offense. That's I liked Tyler Johnson. He actually got some playing time this year and made the most of hit the targets that he did get. But if they end up bringing Antonio Brown back with Godwin and Evans and Gronk, it's just going to be tough for him to carve out a consistent role. Go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm done.
yeah, just too many targets there. No, I like Tyler Johnson. Going back to the draft, I just wanted to throw him in there. Colin Johnson, though, I think that he could definitely be a nice player for the Jags there, especially if Lawrence is coming in. I mean, obviously they still have Cole, they still have D.D. Westbrook, so who knows where he is in the pecking order too, behind Chark and Chenault. But I do like Colin Johnson. Um, yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to touch on with these guys. I just dating back to the draft when you were talking about Lamb. I know we talked about Michael Gallup. Even I think that's when we first brought it up. Was like when we were shocked that they took CeeDee Lamb, but um, it just makes it a lot easier to move on from Gallup when that time comes, whether it be this year in a trade, this during the season, during the off season, or just cutting them for nothing next off season, or not really cutting them, but just not renewing them next year, next off season for nothing, and just going ahead with Lamb and Cooper's, or yeah, with Lamb and Cooper. Um, there's actually a name that we kind of both forgot. I just added him on there right now. But Gabe Davis from the Buffalo Bills. He's I mean, Josh Allen, with the way that he's throwing the ball all over the field, he's been looked at a lot. He's been involved in some trick plays. He's been he's just been he's been on the field, especially with John Brown out a little bit. Cole Beasley missed the last 2 games, and he's probably going to be missing this week too. So, and I think John Brown, I'm pretty sure he signed a 3-year deal last offseason or 2 off seasons ago. but I think he does have an out this year. So if they want to move on from him and go with Beasley, Diggs, and Davis, that's another option there, especially if Josh Allen is going to be chucking the rock 450 or 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. So that's a name to keep your eye on. Um,
Yeah, he had 599 yards this year, by the way, and 7 touchdowns. I mean,
yeah,
that's a really nice rookie season.
he was a touchdown machine there. He had one less touchdown than Diggs. I forgot how many Beasley had, but he definitely looked good. The when you were talking about the three wide receivers, Pittman, Ruggs, and Judy, one thing that I just wanted to bring up is we completely forgot that, not forgot, but like we just brushed off to the side that these teams were without Paris Campbell, Tyrell Williams, and Cortland Sutton this year too. So some targets are probably going to go away, or it's just going to open up these guys a little bit more. I mean, Campbell is a burner. He's Cortland Sutton. He's going to be the number one. I mean, you might think that some Broncos fans might think that Judy is the one there, but Cortland's the one, Judy's the 1B. And then Tyrell Williams, the lesser of the three on this list, but he last year with Derek Carr, he had an excellent year. Him and Waller were the two bright spots on that team with Josh Jacobs, and then just having his presence there is definitely going to help out whoever the quarterback is there next year. So um, that's that should help these guys. Hopefully, it doesn't hurt them. Everybody else, I mean, I completely agree with what you said. Quintez Cephas, I know I was using him a little bit in DraftKings towards the end of the year, especially just more and more. Calladay, I don't even know why he was never put on IR. That just kind of ticks me off because every week you're like, oh, is he coming back this week? Oh no,
Just to
he's
make you angry.
yeah. And then finally you could put him in your IR slot on Saturday when it's too late. But Cephas, I think he's going to be a special player too. Hopefully Stafford's still there and we can get some fantasy relevancy out of Cephas because I don't want that to happen with a new quarterback. And finally, the most boring position this year, not a lot happened there, was the tight ends.
What about rookie kickers?
Rodrigo
No,
Blankenship, he's K1.
Rodrigo.
Um, oh, actually, no, Tyler Bass is K1. Rodrigo's 2.
And nobody likes that guy.
He's now the Bills season record holder for points for a kicker, which is also points. But tight ends, Cole Kmet was really the biggest one that stands out here. The other three that I have down didn't really see a lot of time. Albert O ended up getting hurt. I threw him in there because when he was out there, him and Fant, it looked like he was off to a good start. It looked like Fant or Drew Lock was looking his way. I think that they could run a bunch of nice two tight end sets, get them both involved, and especially if they get Cortland Sutton back. You're looking at Sutton, Judy, Hamler, Albert O, Noah Fant, Melvin Gordon. It's a pretty. They got a lot of offensive weapons on that team. They just have to. I mean, and you have to have those kind of weapons if you're going to keep up with the Kansas City Chiefs twice a year. So, Albert O, Harrison Bryant. We saw him a little bit when there was some COVID going around and some injuries going around. The 1 week that all the wide receivers were on the COVID list. Him and Austin Hooper led the way with targets and catches. I think he had more yards that game. Austin Hooper led with like 15 targets, 16 targets, but we saw him get involved. We saw him involved when Austin Hooper missed a game or two also. So that's is something to look out for there. The only thing that really scares me there is, yeah, they just brought in Austin Hooper. He's got a couple years left in his contract. This was just year one, and they still got David Njoku. So he's kind of third. He's kind of like a 2-3 in the order there. Got to see what happens with Njoku. They got Odell coming back. They got Jarvis Landry. They got Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. Nick Chubb, who can catch balls. So that's another team that has a lot of offensive weapons there. So from a fantasy standpoint, it's hard to really trust them, but it's a name to look out for in dynasty leagues. And then Adam Troutman, the uncertainty of Drew Brees under center. Jared Cook is getting up there in age too, so Troutman could be the next guy in line there from the tight end position.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's a pretty unexciting group of rookie tight ends here, but I do agree. Albert O was getting more targets than Noah Fant at one point. He only played in 4 games, but he had 15 targets, almost 4 targets a game. I mean, that's not bad considering the state of the tight end position was pretty terrible across the league this year. So he could have ended up being pretty fantasy relevant if he stayed healthy all year. And I mean, Cole Kmet really is the leader there. I'm not a big Adam Troutman fan. I don't think he's ever going to be a big time tight end. But Cole Kmet had some flashes this year, and I think that he'll. It's funny because I said coming into this season that the tight end position was the deepest I'd ever seen, and then the tight ends kind of flopped all year. So Cole Kmet, I think, could be end up sneaking in and being a top 10 tight end next season if he continues to get targets consistently. So I think he's really the only guy that I would consider moving forward.
The only other name that I could really bring up, I didn't write him down, but if the Patriots end up going, if it's more, if it's Josh McDaniel's system and not Tom Brady, the quarterback himself, and they go and they start targeting their tight ends like they did when they had Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez on the team, then Devin Asiasi is another name to bring up for them, but I don't like the Patriots. I'm going to leave them out.
Yep, you'd be biased if you left him out.
All right, and then our last segment that we're gonna do is, or is there any other rookies that you want to bring up? I mean, you joked about kickers. We talked about the.
I'm just glad you brought up Rodrigo Blankenship because that's my boy. That's my crowning fantasy moment all the entire season is in the Colts mini episode. I said that Rodrigo Blankenship would be a fantasy relevant kicker, and that's all that I needed this season.
And that's actually a perfect segue then too, because you got the battle of the two hot rookie kickers in the first game of the playoffs this year. We're going to talk about the wild card matchup. So you got the number 7 seed Indianapolis Colts, led out there by Rodrigo Blankenship, going up against the number 2 seed, the Buffalo Bills. Bills hosting their first home game in, well, first division winners since 1995. Third playoff game in 4 years. Sean McDermott has really turned this team around, but it's there's a lot of excitement. The first year that we made the playoffs under McDermott, it was just wow, we were excited to make the playoffs. Last year when we made the playoffs, it was even more excitement. Thought that maybe we even had a chance to win, and then Deshaun Watson said no. And now this year, it's like now we're kind of expected to win. So it's crazy, just watching this team grow. But we're here to talk about the whole matchup, not just the Bills. The Bills start off I'm using Yahoo spreads here. They are 6-point favorites in Buffalo. Weather this time of year is around low 30s, high 20s. Haven't really had a lot of snow. I don't know what it's looking like for this weekend, but it's gonna be one of those games where as long as it's not crazy windy, Josh Allen should be able to throw and Jonathan Taylor should be able to run. Um, Breaking down the quarterbacks, you got Philip Rivers up against Josh Allen. Philip Rivers is 4-0 in wild card games. He's got an excellent line in front of him. He's got Jonathan Taylor to hand the ball off behind him. He's got some weapons there. Josh Allen, he's an MVP candidate. I don't think he's going to get it. I think Aaron Rodgers just had the better year. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to get more of the votes, end up winning the MVP if they hand out a co-MVP award, like they did the year that Manning and McNair won it. I could see it being a Rodgers and Allen award there. That's just how good he's been. Do you want to cover the running backs?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go, no, you keep going. I'll just give a general overview at the end.
All right, running backs, you got to give the edge here to the Colts. Not only do they have Jonathan Taylor, but they got Hines out of the backfield, and the Bills' rushing defense. It started off the season kind of bad. It has gotten better, but Jonathan Taylor, I mean, that's got to be their main focus this weekend is to try to take away Jonathan Taylor and force a statue of Philip Rivers to hopefully get to him, because I mean he could pick you apart if he has a lot of time. So they gotta get to Philip Rivers, but they also got to be able to stop Jonathan Taylor. He could catch the ball out of the backfield too. He's had some long catch and runs this year for touchdowns. He's been one of the hottest rookie running backs and just one of the hottest running backs overall the back half of the year. So that's the biggest threat right there. On the running back side for the Bills, you got Devin Singletary, Zach Moss. The Bills haven't really been able to establish a run that much. And part of it's because just really lack of trying. They just, I mean, Josh Allen's just firing the ball over the place. But the other part of it is just Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are really not hitting those holes. And the Colts do have one of the better defenses too. They've kind of slowed down a little bit during the first half of the year. They were one of the top defenses, one of the best streaming defenses in fantasy. Some very favorable matchups, but even when they had matchups where you're kind of questioning, oh, do I want to play the Colts against them? They ended up still having a pretty good game. So that Colts defense is legit. The wide receivers on the Colts side, you got T.Y. Hilton, you got Michael Pittman. Not it's and T.Y. Hilton has had the past 3 or 4 games. I mean, he's had Houston in those games too, but twice. But he's kind of came along with Philip Rivers. Michael Pittman, we just talked about the rookie wide receivers. He hasn't really been where we thought he would be, but he is still a threat. He's a bigger body. He can catch the ball at all areas of the field. Philip Rivers is pretty accurate. I mean, he's thrown for what 70,000 yards, 60,000 yards in his career, so we know that he could throw the ball. On the Bills side, Cole Beasley is expected to be out. Stephon Diggs was even a little bit banged up this week. I expect him to play. He is questionable. Hopefully he does play. It'll be a huge blow if he doesn't. And then we mentioned Gabe Davis a little bit, and John Brown came back last week, and Josh Allen found John Brown a few times last week. So if Cole Beasley misses, I think that they're not really going to miss a beat there. They have a nice trio of wide receivers. They did bring in Kenny Stills this past week, but I don't think he's going to be activated for this game. If they do advance, we might see him in the playoffs, but we're probably not going to see him this week. The tight end position, you got Trey Burton, you got Mo Alley Cox, and Philip Rivers. You know that he likes his tight ends going back to L.A. and San Diego, whatever you want to call them. He had Antonio Gates, he had Hunter Henry. So he's always had pretty solid tight ends around him his whole career, and Trey Burton has been one of his favorite targets this year. A lot of touchdowns, but he's one of those. He's really, and just like most of the tight ends in the league, he's really touchdown dependent, boom or bust. He could have a game where he catches nothing, or he could have a game where he goes out there and catches 3 touchdowns. And that's an area where the Bills are they're gonna have to watch Jonathan Taylor, and they're gonna have to watch Trey Burton. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not all too worried about T.Y. Hilton, because on the other side of T.Y. Hilton, he should be lining up against Tre'Davious White, so that really doesn't worry me too much. Even though T.Y. Hilton, for the most of his career, he has been a burner. He has the ability to kind of just burn past cornerbacks and get down the field, catch long bombs. He's a little bit older now. Don't really know if that's going to happen against Tre'Davious White, but Trey Burton and Jonathan Taylor are the two that I would probably worry about the most. From the Bills side, you got Dawson Knox. Seems like he can only catch the ball if you got 2 or 3 guys on him. If you throw it to him wide open, he does like to drop it a lot, especially if it's in the end zone. But the Bills really haven't implemented the tight end that much this year. I mean, Josh Allen, like I said, he's throwing the ball a lot. He's looking all over the field, but Dawson Knox really isn't getting a lot of those targets. So in this matchup, I'd probably give the edge to Trey Burton for the Colts.
My analysis of Dawson Knox is he plays in the NFL. That's it. That is literally. I think this is going to be a fun game, though, actually. So, I mean, when you look at some of the numbers from it, these are 2 teams that are both in the top 10 in scoring offense this season. The Bills scored the second most points, the Colts ninth. So, I do think you could see some points in this one. I know one of the things that we were messaging about one day, and it's a concern for the Bills, is their rush defense. You didn't want them to play the Ravens or the Titans and
Nope.
have to face those strong run games there. But when I was looking at the Bills' numbers, their improvement was actually pretty significant. So over the first 10 games, they allowed 4 100-yard rushers. And then over the last 6 games, the highest single rushing total against the Bills is only 61 yards. So over the last 6 games, they've actually done a really good job at stopping the run, and I think that's going to be key in this game. You don't want to let Jonathan Taylor run all over your defense, and I think if he does, I think the Colts could definitely take this and kind of steal it away from the Bills. Everybody's picking the Bills, but if their run defense doesn't stay strong and you see a 130-yard and 2 touchdown game from Jonathan Taylor, I do think that could favor the Colts. And I'll say if the Colts somehow make it past the Bills, I could see Jonathan Taylor having a Derrick Henry kind of postseason, just where he has to shoulder and carry the load. And, the Colts have a pretty solid defense, so we'll see what happens. I don't expect that to happen because the Bills' run defense has been much stronger. One of the biggest advantages I think the Bills have in this game as well is the Colts. I mean, you were being kind of polite about it. Their pass defense has been horrendous, the Colts, as of late. So, if you look at their past 5 games, I think sometimes people get a little too fixated on looking at the season as a whole when it comes to analyzing these playoff games. But really, it's like, what do you have? What have you done for me lately? And who's healthy? What's going on here? So I'm looking at the last 5 games here for their Colts. In 4 of those 5 games, they allowed over 300 yards passing. And the only game they didn't was week 17 against Mike Glennon, who had 261. So it's still not that great. So the Colts' pass defense has really, really struggled over the course of the last 5 weeks. So, I mean, if you know a thing or two about the Bills' offense this year, their passing game has not struggled at all. So I think the Bills could put up a lot of points through the air against the Colts. I think it's a huge advantage for them. I don't think the Colts are going to be able to slow down Josh Allen at all in this one, and I never thought I would have said that a year ago. So that's progress and growth. But I mean, that's the reality. The Colts' run defense is one of the best in the league, so I don't see Singletary or Moss doing much. I think they'll keep Josh Allen in check with his legs, but through the air, Josh Allen should absolutely carve up the Colts. And I really don't see the Colts having any chance, especially when you consider if the Bills are able to shut down Jonathan Taylor and you're relying on Phillip Rivers to win you the game through the air and T.Y. Hilton is being shadowed. I mean, it doesn't look very promising to me. So I definitely see the Bills taking this one.
Yeah, I had to kind of mellow it down a little bit. I didn't want to sound like a huge homer source because I am. I mean, I'm very excited about the game, but got to be professional here. Gotta give the Colts a chance too. Next game we got is we go from my team to your team. The 6 seed LA Rams out of the NFC up against the 3 seed Seattle Seahawks, division winners of the NFC West. Seattle opens up this week as a 3.5 point favorite. Again, this is according to Yahoo. You got the not really any elements per se, but it's an outdoor stadium. I mean, the 12th man isn't there because of the no fans or 15% fans, 25% fans, whatever it might be. I don't know what it is out in that state and in that area, but um, this is the third time we're seeing these guys go off against each other, and they split the series this season 1-1. It really looked like for a good portion of the season that the Seattle was going to run away with the division, and then it kind of looked like LA was going to run away with the division. And then both teams has kind of struggled the past couple weeks. Ultimately, Seattle did end up winning the division and taking the 3 seed, while LA has to travel to Seattle now. And I'll let you break this one down.
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like the Rams and Seahawks have played every week for some reason, but this is the third time that they've played this year. The first time around, the Rams at home took it 23-16. Second time, the Seahawks won at home 20-9. Both of them were, I mean, I would call them defensive slugfest for the most part. They weren't exciting. There wasn't a lot of touchdowns. You had a lot of field goals. I mean, the Rams winning this game comes all down to their defense winning it for them. I mean, this isn't going to be a game where you see the Rams score 40 points. I mean, there's just no way of that happening. Their offense has really struggled as of late, and the Seahawks defense has been much improved. I mean, I'd like to see John Wolford start. I mean, starting there at the quarterback for the Rams. We have no idea who's starting for them as of right now. Sean
Kurt
McVay said
Warner.
he's gonna. Yeah, is he bagging groceries now? What he's doing? What is he doing? But Sean McVay is going to keep it under wraps until right before the game. I mean, I liked what I saw from John Wolford, except his interception on his very first pass attempt, which made me very upset. But after that, he really settled in. He made some plays with his legs. But I do think that Jared Goff actually gives them a better chance to win in this game just because the Seattle secondary is more vulnerable than their run defense. The Seahawks have been pretty good at shutting down the run this season. They've been a top 10 defensive unit in terms of shutting down the run. So I don't think the Rams are going to have an easy time with Cam Akers isn't going to have a huge day against the Seahawks defense. So I think Jared Goff is, if he does start, is going to have to make big plays down the field. And as much as I don't like Jared Goff, at this point he does give them a better opportunity through the air than John Wolford. As much as I'd like to see him get another opportunity, this isn't the time to play around. We kind of got to win the game here. Your season's over. That's how it works. So I think that's what it comes down for the Rams is they have to be aggressive through the air, take advantage of some of the vulnerabilities in that Seahawks secondary. Their defense has been the number one defense for most of the season. They were allowed the fewest points. They allowed the second few or the third fewest rush yards. They were good through the air. I mean, their defense was very dominant throughout the entire season. And Russell Wilson really struggled against the Rams this year. He only threw for one touchdown and turned the ball over 4 times in those 2 games. So if the Rams are able to shut down Russell Wilson once again. I mean, the Seahawks only averaged 18 points against the Rams this year, which isn't a lot, but I'm also not confident the Rams could score more than 18 points at this point right now. So, if the Rams are going to win this game, they're going to have to shut down Russell Wilson, and I think Jared Goff is going to have to take advantage of their vulnerabilities in the secondary. For the Seahawks to win, I think Russell Wilson's going to have to be better than he was in the first 2 matchups. One of the reasons I think they won the second time around was Chris Carson was healthy and they were a little more balanced. Because the reality is, when their offense becomes predictable and they chuck it around, Russell Wilson hasn't been as good. This offense is at its best when it's balanced. So at the end of the day, though, I mean, both the defenses have been really good. To me, it comes down to Russell Wilson versus whoever the Rams quarterback's going to be. And at the end of the day, you have to give the advantage to Russell Wilson. I don't expect this to be a high scoring game. I think it'll be similar to the first two. You know, both teams score around 20 points, if not less. And I think it's going to be a pretty boring defensive slugfest. I like defensive slugfest, but most people don't.
So what you're saying is smash the over.
Yes,
All right.
immediately. The over is probably like 15.
All right. The final game that we got on Saturday, because now we do have three with the 7 teams making the playoffs this year and only one bye week, so we got 6 games in total for Wild Card Weekend. The night game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up against the Washington Football Team. Tampa is the only team this round to be favored on the road. They are 8.5 point favorites over Washington, who basically coming off a winning in against quite a few Philly backups on Sunday night. There was some news about that throughout the week with Giants players pissed off and Doug Peterson basically saying that just pulling Jalen Hurts for Nate Sudfeld. Jalen Hurts wasn't having the greatest game. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, but he was 7 for 17 for 72 yards or something. So if you're a fan of any of those NFC East teams, everybody's going to have their own opinions. The reality is the Washington Football Team with a 7-9 record won the division and host a home game against Tom Brady. Maybe you've heard of him before, maybe you haven't, of the Buccaneers. And I know you wrote about this one too, so I'll let you have this one as well.
Yeah, and I think, and I put this in the fantasy hotspot the one day, I do think this is going to be a better game than people anticipate. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be hard for Washington to win. I mean, the Bucks offense is, we'll say, much stronger than Washington's,
A
just a
little
little
bit,
bit.
yeah.
The Bucks, they scored the third most points in the league, so I mean, their offense was very potent this year. Second most pass yards. They were only 27th in rush yards, which is not much to speak of. But I do think that if the Bucks want to thrive offensively, I don't think they're going to be able to rely on Tom Brady in this one, because that's one of the strengths of Washington is stopping teams through the air, because they pressure the quarterback and make it hard for them to have a clean pocket. So there's a lot of messy throws when you're going up against Washington. So if they rely on Tom Brady, I think it's going to be a long day. Washington's run defense is they're average. They're 14th in the league, so almost exactly in the middle. So if Tampa Bay is a little more balanced and they rely on their backfield, I think that's a better game plan for them, rather than relying on Tom Brady in this one. Because if they drop back and pass the ball 50 times, Chase Young and the rest of that defensive front is going to be in Tom Brady's face all day long, and I don't think that the Bucks are going to be able to move the ball very effectively. So I think they got to have a balanced attack. But at the end of the day, the reason that I think the Bucks could make a really deep run this season is their defense doesn't get any credit, but they have a really fun, fast, young defense. They gave up the sixth fewest yards in the league, so they were really good all year. And one of the things that I think is going to hurt Washington is the Bucks have the number one ranked rush defense. So to me, if Washington wants to win, that means they're going to have to take advantage, not on the ground, but through the air. So if Washington wins, they're going to have to put their offensive game plan on the arm of Alex Smith. And I don't think that's a formula for success personally. But really, if you're just looking at the strengths and weaknesses of both teams, you have to take advantage of your opponent's weaknesses. And in this case, it's not a huge weakness. The Bucs secondary is still good, but it's not as strong as their run defense. So I think that they'd have to put on Alex Smith, and for that reason, I'm out. And the Bucks are gonna take this one, in my opinion. I mean, you have all the playoff experience of Tom Brady as well, but to me, I just don't think, that's how I try to analyze games. I look at the strengths and weaknesses of each team and see where teams can take advantage. And when you look at the Buccaneers' weaknesses, number one weakness would probably be their pass defense. Like I said, it's not a huge weakness, but it is probably their biggest weakness. And I can't see Washington taking advantage of that. So I unexcitingly am picking the Bucks, but I do think Washington has a chance because Bruce Arians gets a little cute sometimes. He likes to just drop back or have his quarterback drop back, pass, pass, pass. But this is playoff time. I don't think Tom Brady's going to mess around with any Bruce Arians nonsense. He's going to do what it takes to win.
Yeah, I mean the Bucks potentially without Mike Evans, he had a pretty rough injury week 17 that I thought he's gonna be out a lot longer, but for him to be even questionable is really shocking to me. I mean, I, I don't know. For initial thought was that he tore his ACL,
Hmm.
even though it wasn't in a tear motion. He did hyperextend it. But I mean, you know what hyperextension means. That could mean a tear. That could mean it was sprained. But he possibly could be back this week. But if he's out, I mean that definitely helps out the football team there. It's They look to be going into this game pretty healthy. I mean, I know Alex Smith has been banged up a little bit, but Antonio Gibson is back. J.D. McKissick he was hurt a little bit on Sunday night, but I think he came back into the game. Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas. I mean, they do have weapons out there, and Alex Smith is pretty conservative with the football. I mean, Ron Rivera is a good coach, so it's not like they're definitely out coaching this game or anything. The defense is good. I think this is probably the worst matchup for the Bucks, and I wouldn't call it the best matchup for the football team because I think they could have a chance against the Rams or the Seahawks or even the Bears. Obviously, definitely the Bears, but it's a decent matchup for the football team. But the Bucks, I mean, I'm pretty sure Bucks and Bucks fans all over are thinking that are wishing that they had any other team in this first round except for the football team. All right, now you're going to sleep. wake up, have some breakfast, go get your coffee, turn on the TV at 1 o'clock Eastern time, and then you got the Ravens versus the Titans, and this is a
Mhm.
matchup of last year's divisional round game where the Titans surprisingly beat the New England Patriots, and the Ravens were kind of just they were the one seed in the or yeah the one seed in the AFC, and were they the one or the two? Why don't I remember
Uh,
that?
I believe they were the one.
They had the bye. I know that. I
Yep.
don't remember if the Chiefs finished ahead of them though. But so you got the Ravens versus the Titans. This game has Baltimore as okay. Well, it turns out that I lied to you guys. Baltimore is actually favored on the road at -3.5. So I do apologize. The Bucks are not the only road team favored in this one. I thought the Titans would be favored, and I guess I just didn't look past it. So the Baltimore Ravens are favored in this game. This I think is I mean, we got two divisional games on this weekend, but I think this is the game of the weekend. You got Tannehill, who can throw the ball, but you also had the league's leading rusher 2 years in a row. Went over for 2,000 yards this year rushing on the ground. Lamar Jackson, he is dynamic with his feet and also has been getting better with his arm. I mean, he's been getting Miles Boykin involved a little bit. He's been getting Des Bryant involved lately. Hollywood Brown has come on a little bit. I mean, we haven't even seen the best of Mark Andrews this year, so he's got weapons all around him. Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith for the Titans. I mean, you're looking at it and thinking that it's just two run-heavy teams, but both of these teams have pass catchers on their teams where we could see some fireworks back and forth. They played, I forgot what week it was, but they played earlier in the season. So this is another one of those matchup games. And I actually bet the over in this game, and I hit it, and I was happy about that. I could see another fireworks type game here. Neither of these teams' defenses are top tier. I mean, the Ravens. I think they started out the year really well, but they have kind of let up some points, quite a bit of points lately. We saw that Monday night game against the Browns that was pretty crazy, and they've just been giving up some points too. But they are. This game is going to be. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think it's going to be. AJ Brown has another year under him. Tannehill is a good quarterback. I mean, we could probably even put him in the great tier now, but. Um, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this game because it's just getting me all excited and I can't even think.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest toss-up of the entire weekend, which is a little unfair to say because any of these games can go either direction. But I just feel like this is definitely the most competitive and the one where you're like, I don't really know what direction this is gonna go in. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised if the Titans win, and you wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens won. I mean, you can say Washington has a chance, but I mean, don't lie. It'd be a little surprising if Washington beats Tom Brady and the Bucks. I mean, that's just the reality. Is I still think that it'll be a competitive game, but it would be a little surprising. But this game, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me either way. It was a fantastic game the first time around this season, 30-24 overtime matchup. So I mean, as advertised, really. And I mean, it's tough to break down this game. I mean, Derrick Henry in the first matchup was held to 133 yards. I guess that's holding him at this point. And the Titans' biggest weakness as a team is through the air. Their secondary is very bad. The Titans. They had the fourth most yards allowed through the air. So they really struggled year in and year or game in and game out this season. So if the Ravens want to take advantage offensively, as you mentioned, I mean it's going to have to be on Lamar's arm this week. They're not going to be able to rely on that run game as much as they want to. And I mean that's not to say the Titans' rush defense isn't fantastic either. Um, they're kind of middle of the pack as well in rush defense, but their secondary is really bad. So I think if the Ravens want to win, they're going to have to take advantage through the air. And if the Titans want to win, I mean, they got to keep riding Derrick Henry. I mean, that's the reality, and that's very thorough analysis right there. It's stating the obvious, but I mean that's the reality that we're in right now. So the Ravens' pass defense has been very strong all season, so I can't see Tannehill having a huge game. I think he'll be held in check for the most part. So when you're looking at where can one of these teams take advantage, I really think it's the Ravens through the air. I mean, to me, and I like numbers, but you do buy into storylines a little bit. That divisional loss last year made the Ravens, I mean, just look pretty bad as an organization. People already are questioning, can Lamar Jackson win in the playoffs only after two playoff starts? I mean, the Ravens dominated in the regular season last year, and to just come out and not even get one playoff one was very disappointing. So I think this is a matchup the Ravens want because they want to prove that they're a different team than last year. They're very hot right now. The Ravens are the kind of team that go on a huge winning streak at the end of the year and end up winning the Super Bowl. They're on that kind of run right now. So, to me, one of the biggest differentiating factors, and I know the Ravens lost in the regular season, but this is their time to prove. And this is Lamar Jackson. I mean, I think Lamar Jackson needs to carry the load here. He needs to come out and say, hey, I'm an elite quarterback in this league and I can win in the playoffs. Because if he goes 0-3 and his first three playoff starts, people are going to keep chirping. And I think Lamar's the kind of guy, he can say he doesn't listen, but he does listen because he wants to prove people wrong. And so I think he has a lot of bulletin board material this week. And I have the Ravens winning this one. I see a lot of people picking the Titans. A lot of people are saying that Derrick Henry is going to steamroll over the Ravens, but I have a lot of faith. I think Lamar is going to come out and have a huge game.
Yeah, it's another one of those games where I happen to be at work during it. The two games that I'm looking forward to the most, it's right smack dab in the middle of my day, 6 hours into my 12-hour shift. These games are starting, but I'm just fortunate that I will be able to watch them a little bit, at least listen to them, because we got some good football this weekend going on. The next game there is the 7 seed Bears, who kind of limped into the playoffs. They either needed to win against the Packers or they needed the Cardinals to lose to the Rams, and the latter happened. The backup quarterback for the Rams beat the Cardinals in Week 17, so the Bears got in, and they're up against the number 2 seed, the Saints, who have they've had a weird season. It seems like this is a rematch game. They did play earlier in the year, and that game went to overtime. The Saints won
Yeah.
23-20. Nick Foles was under center for that game, and now we're looking at Mitch Trubisky. But I mean, the Saints just like it's. I don't know if you remember the Packers last year, but it seems like the Saints this year, like the Packers last year, like we kind of expected them to be good, and they are. They're the 2 seed in the NFC. We also, it's, I like off the top of my head without looking at the schedule, it doesn't seem like they had the kind of season that they actually had. Like, I mean, do you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
seems like they should have been better and more dominant than what they were, is what I'm trying to say. I think they'll be pretty dominant in this game. It's this is the heaviest point spread in the week. It's 10 points to the Bears. So Saints are 10 point favorites in this game at home. Drew Brees in the Superdome. Michael Thomas should be coming back. Alvin Kamara is there. Emmanuel Sanders has kind of come on a little bit lately. So their offense is kind of clicking on all cylinders. It seems like the last couple games. I know you wrote about this one too, so I'll turn it over to you, so I'm not stealing all your thunder.
Yeah, you're stealing all my thunder. Just go, whatever, do whatever you want. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised. I mean, I remembered that they played, but I mean, this was a really competitive game the first time around, and everybody's ruling out the possibility of the Bears winning. But you mentioned it went to overtime the first time. One of the things that does concern me, though, is the Bears played really well in that game. I mean, I don't want to say flawlessly, but they played really well and they still lost. And the Saints were not on their A game that day. It was really interesting when I looked at some of the deeper stats on it. The Saints went 2 for 13 on third down in that game and 1 for 4 in the red zone. I mean, that's terrible, but they still won. I mean, that's kind of the concern with this game for me right now. I mean, I think if the Bears win, they're going to have to be pretty flawless. I mean, even more so than the last time that they played. So what that means is they need to convert on third down. They need to convert in the red zone. If the Bears get in the red zone, they cannot kick field goals. They need to score touchdowns.
Well, they just hit posts
And
anyways.
well, yeah, that's true. So why even kick a field goal at that point? It's just 0 points automatically. So, I mean, their offensive attack is a little more balanced than it was at that time. They've been relying on David Montgomery more than they were at that. But Dave Montgomery did have 89 yards in that game, but he's been on an absolute tear as of late. But the Saints. The Saints defense is really good. I mean, that's the biggest key to me in this game. So the Bears, if they're going to win, they're going to have to be pretty flawless. I think just take advantage of the opportunities that they have because I don't think they're going to have many opportunities. I mean, this Saints defense, I would say, is the best defense that Drew Brees has ever had in his career. And I don't think it's overly close. I think it's better than the defense they had when they won the Super Bowl. And I think this is going to be a case where I'll finish up on the defensive side, but yeah, I mean, in terms of rushing and total points allowed and total passing yards allowed, the Saints were all in the top five, their defense. So this is a fantastic defense, and that's one of the reasons I can't see the Bears offense having a huge game. There's really no weaknesses that they're going to be able to take advantage of. If they were going to, I'd say it's probably through the air. The secondary of the Saints is a little weaker than their rush defense, so I guess you're going to rely on old Mitch to win you the game offensively if the Bears were to stay competitive in this one. But I mean, the Saints, I have a lot of confidence are going to be able to shut down the Bears offense. I'm a little more concerned offensively since Drew Brees has come back from his injury, he hasn't been as strong. He's thrown 3 interceptions in 3 games, and he just hasn't looked like his usual self. I mean, Drew Brees is known as one of the most accurate passers in NFL history, and you can just tell that he's not 100% right now, and that his accuracy is a little off. So I think the Bears are going to key on Alvin Kamara. Kamara had a pretty big game the first time around, only 67 yards on the ground, but he had 96 yards through the air. So a pretty big game from Kamara, and I really think that the Bears are going to key in and try to stop him. So I think Drew Brees is going to have to come through if the Saints offense wants to click. But at the end of the day, the reason that I can't pick the Bears to win is, like I said, I think they'd have to play too flawlessly to beat the Saints. Because at the end of the day, when you look at it, the Saints have a better defense, they have better coaching, a better quarterback, a better running back, a better offensive line. I mean, literally, the Saints are better than the Bears in every single facet of playing football. So I can't see the Bears winning this one. I expect the Saints to come out. I mean, I picked just as a side note, I did pick the Saints to win the Super Bowl in the preseason, and I'm still sticking by that. I think their defense is the kind of defense that can carry them, and if Drew Brees is able to click with that run game and all the pieces together, I also believe in some storylines like this. I do think that Drew Brees is probably going to end up retiring, and I think that adds motivation for that locker room because who wouldn't want Drew Brees to win a championship in his last season? So when you put all those factors together, I think the Saints are going to kind of run over the Bears in this one.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be. I mean, who knows with both defenses going in, it could be an exciting game, but I think it might be one of the least exciting games of
Yeah,
the week. I
I
mean, if
do.
you have to rank them, obviously one of them has to be last. So I'm just going to say it's going to be this one. Uh, I am going to do a couple parlays this weekend, and in at least one of them, I am going to take the Bears with the points, but I'm not really expecting too much from that one. Um, but I'm probably going to be taking all the underdogs, or not all the underdogs, but I'm going to take the football team and I'm going to take the Bears. Maybe not in the same parlay, but in two separate parlays, just to have it. But I'm not really too confident in this one.
Mhm.
And then the final game that we got is another divisional matchup. You got the Browns traveling to Pittsburgh for the 8:15 Sunday night game. Um, this might be the last Sunday night game of the season, I believe, because after this week they just where they do ones and fours, or
Yeah.
Saturday might be 4 and 8, but yeah, there's no more Sunday night games after this week. Um, the 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 Browns and Steelers, they split the season series 1-1, 1-1 with an asterisk because the first game the Steelers just blew them out. The second game, which was in Week 17 for the Browns to get into the playoffs, they were up against all the backups, including a couple out with COVID for the Steelers, and just the other ones just being sat. Ben didn't even dress. Hayden was out with COVID. Um, who else? I mean, Connor played, and the wide receivers for the most part played, but the biggest ones were out of the game. So it was, and that game ended up coming down to it was 24-22 was the final score. So the Browns barely just beat some backups, but they did get into the playoffs and broke a 17-year drought or a 12-year drought, and yeah. So we got a divisional matchup here, AFC North matchup. Steelers are 6-point favorites at home in Heinz Field. I think with both teams going in, I mean, as healthy as you're going to be in the 18th week of the season, with the exception of Odell Beckham Jr., pretty much the biggest name that's not going to be out there. I think the Browns have a decent chance in this one. I just think the Steelers' defense is going to be too much for them, and the offense has the ability to click. Roethlisberger with all of his weapons on the outside. They the offense for the Steelers kind of reminds me a little bit of the Bills, where they don't really use the running back that much. James Conner was kind of underwhelming this year, and then when Benny Snell had a chance to take over, he really didn't do much. We didn't see a lot of Anthony McFarland in the backfield at all. But so I mean, they have running backs. They're employed on the roster. They just don't use them. But they can pass the ball all over the place. The Browns' defense is they're not bad, and obviously being a divisional game, they do know each other. And I would give the Browns a little bit of a shot in this game, but I think it's going to be a rough one for them. I think the Steelers are going to win this one pretty easily. And that would bring them to play the Bills in the next week, which I would welcome with open arms. But Mayfield versus Roethlisberger, Mayfield's been up and down. Roethlisberger he's been pretty good. I mean, a lot of his numbers are hurt because the Steelers receivers like to drop the ball a lot, and so does Eric Ebron. So I mean, he could have had an even better season than he had comeback season and in the running for comeback player of the year, but I think Alex Smith gets that. That's a different story. The running back edge you got to give to the Browns with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. That's their. I mean, that's going to be their bread and butter there. Nick Chubb is matchup proof. I mean, just because you're going up against the Steelers, it's not like they're not. I don't think they're going to shut him down. I think that he's going to have a pretty solid game. He's one of those players that I mean, I think I might have said it to you a couple times. I know there's a group text that with my buddies I say it, but Nick Chubb just quietly gets 100-yard games. Just I mean, you don't even realize it. You don't even think about it. But you look up and looking at the stat sheet, and it's the third quarter, and wow, he's at 104 yards. Where'd that come from? And then Kareem Hunt, obviously out of the backfield. Jarvis Landry, he's been clicking with Mayfield lately. So I mean, hopefully he's in for a big game if the Browns want to have any kind of chance in this game. But the defense has to step up, and they got to stop the Steelers because we know the Steelers can score.
Yeah, and fun stat on Nick Chubb, and I found this as I was doing some research for this game. The Browns were 6-0 this season when Nick Chubb rushed for 100 yards. That's kind of interesting to me, and it's similar to the Titans and Derrick Henry last year. The Titans were 8-0 last season when Derrick Henry went over 100 yards. So Nick Chubb has that same kind of ability, and maybe Nick Chubb goes on a run like Derrick Henry this year, and he can carry the Browns through the playoffs. And I really think that's kind of what's going to have to happen. The Steelers' secondary has been really good. I mean, the rush defense has been they're 11th in the league, so not as great as their pass defense. But the Steelers, I mean, the Browns, I really think that they're going to have to rely on Nick Chubb if they want to win this game. I think that's the key to it. If they get Nick Chubb going and he has a big game, I think the Browns can take this. I really do. And on the Steelers side, the Browns secondary is pretty weak. They're one of the worst in the league. They were bottom 10 this year. So The Steelers had one of the best passing offenses, which is the reason why I would pick the Steelers, because I think if Ben gets in a rhythm against that pretty poor Browns secondary, you'll see them just have an easy time the rest of the afternoon, or the rest of the night, I should say. So I think that's the biggest advantage there. But don't be surprised. I mean, I haven't seen one person pick the Browns. If Nick Chubb has a big game, I think that the Browns can go on to the next round, and I think they can go even further. This is the kind of team, if they just rely on the run game and Baker does just enough and their defense is able to just hold opponents to a reasonable number, I think the Browns can make a little bit of a run. But just based on their weakness in the secondary, I think it's going to be too easy for the Steelers to pass in this one.
All right. So that's pretty much going to do it for the wild card matchups. We will be doing this again next week for the divisional matchups. You already said that the Saints, you're picking the Saints to win the Super Bowl, but is their opponent playing this Saturday, or do you think it's the Chiefs?
So preseason, and I always stick by it. I never, I try not to go off of. I picked the Ravens and the Saints preseason,
Okay.
so I'm gonna stick with it.
All right. Good. I mean, definitely have a chance because both of those teams made the playoffs, so that's a good start there. Um, yeah, my preseason prediction was Chiefs over Saints. So obviously my teams are still in the playoffs too. But now that the Bills are looking as good as they are, I mean, I definitely got to root for them. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Chiefs over the Saints or the Chiefs over anybody. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, they just looked bored in the regular season, and they're just going to turn it on and score 50 a game when the playoffs start. Um, the only other thing I wanted to say when we were talking about the Bears and Saints before we jumped into the Browns and Steelers was if we do another head coaching vacancy show, do you think there's a chance that we see the Bears up on that list too? I mean, that's like I said, they kind of limped into the playoffs. It's been not really rumored that they were going to let them go, but more fans really aren't excited with their coaching there, and just had a rough couple seasons. I mean, with the seventh, obviously, if this was a 16 playoffs like regular years, they're not making it. So it would be another year with an 8-8 record and no playoffs. So do you think we could see the Bears looking for a head coach this summer?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that they should. I think that Matt Nagy at this point is a detriment more than an asset to their team. And when it comes to that point, it's time to move on.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to bring that up, like I said, when we were talking about the Bears and Saints, but it kind of just slipped my mind then. Other than that, I believe that is it. A little bit of a longer show. Want to try to cut these down a little bit, so Jordan, just shut up next time. Um, just kidding. You could talk as
I
much as you
will.
want. You can talk as much as you want. I'll just mute you. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that was pretty good. We got a lot of football going on this weekend, and go Bills. Anything you want to say?
No, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. As much as I think it'll be tough for some upsets, I'm hoping for some upsets. That always makes this time of year more exciting.
All right, let's go, John Wolford.
Yeah, John Wolford.
All right, see you guys.